Well, thanks for making time to chat today.
Thanks. You're welcome.
I think the last time that I saw you, I don't know if you remember at all, but it would have been an Ironman race at least 3 years ago now. Did you do the Ironman 3 years ago?
The last one, the Ironman Texas,
Yeah.
was in 16.
So
yeah, 3 years ago.
3 years ago, I came up to watch just a little bit, and you were coming down the finish line, like getting ready to get on the finish line, and I caught you real quick across from that restaurant area right there.
I think I remember that. I think I remember that now.
And I didn't expect to see you, but it was really special to see you because I've always just admired you and respected how you started with racing and just pushing yourself to the limit. And so it was really fun to see. That's the last time I remember seeing you, so it's been a while. But
I was probably pretty delirious at that point, so I saw Elvis a couple of times in some of those finishes.
As long as you didn't see Tupac.
I didn't see Tupac. No.
What was your time that year? Do you remember?
That year, that was that the year of the storm? That was the year of the mega storm, wasn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah.
So it was a shortened course. It was a shortened bike course. It was a 13. I can say this with confidence. It was a 13:18, but then again, it was a shortened bike course.
Yeah.
So that's typically not my finish time. So, but it was if 16, if my memory serves me right, that was the shortened bike course.
Well, what was your fastest time? Do you remember at all?
For all the Ironmans, I've done 8. And I just finished Ironman Florida 2.5 months ago, and I set a PR, 13:26.
Okay, so Ironman Florida, that's one that I've kind of have on my radar to do sometime. It is.
Yeah, it's awesome.
What's the swim like?
The swim can kind of be unpredictable.
Yeah.
I've done it 2 years. I did it in 2017 and 2019, and both times the swim was great. But there has been some times when the breakers for the first 300 or 400 yards are pretty intense, pretty intimidating.
That's what I would wonder. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's almost always wetsuit legal.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you feel pretty secure in a buoyant wetsuit. But once you get past the breakers, it's pretty good. But it's really a good course.
I don't know if I've even asked you this before, but I probably did. What was the turning point for you? Because you've done 8 Ironmans. Mm-hmm. How many other races? Like you've done a lot of triathlons.
Yeah, I've done probably 4 half Ironmans, and I can't tell you how many sprints I've done.
Yeah, and what about do you just do any running on just like half marathons on your own?
Yeah, I've done a few half marathons. The Woodlands half, I do it just about every year. My wife is training for the Houston Marathon, so we did a 25K together, and we did a 30K together.
Okay.
And so, I still enjoy road races, just plain road races. They're so much simpler and stress-free compared to an Ironman.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love the environment of being around people like that. Everybody is so positive. I don't think you can train for and complete an Ironman without having a positive attitude. You just can't do it. And to the same degree, but maybe a little bit lesser degree, you can't finish a half marathon. You can't finish a 10K. You can't finish the 10 for Texas, 10 miler. I've done that 10 years in a row now. You can't do that with a negative attitude.
Yeah.
You can, but you don't find a lot of people with negative attitudes doing those sort of things. And that's what I love about that environment, being around those kind of people.
You say that as if it's something that's super easy for you though, as far as the positive attitude. Because for me, I just did a swim this morning, and I thought maybe I shouldn't do Ironman Texas this year in that swim. It's how do you keep yourself from negativity setting in? I find myself having to fight that a lot.
I don't do Ironman to set any world records. I'm not going to place. I'm not going to podium. First, second, or third. Although, if I did, I wouldn't be too ashamed of it, too disconnected from that. But, to me, going out, I did a 10 miler yesterday. I was supposed to do a 5 miler. Don't tell my coach. I was supposed to do a 5 miler, and I went out yesterday, and the weather was beautiful, and I felt good, and I just kept running. And I knew that from a fatigue standpoint, it was going to hurt because I haven't done a 10 miler in a month or so. But I knew mentally and emotionally how I was going to feel after finishing a 10-miler.
What is it? What do you feel after you do that?
I just feel, I don't know. I don't know if it's the endorphins that mysterious endorphins release that people say you get, but a sense of accomplishment that I've done something for myself that's been healthy. It's a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Justin, I can't tell you the number of times I've faced some difficult decisions, whether it's life or whether it's work. And I'll tee it up before I go on a run. I mean, literally, I walk to the end of the driveway and I go, okay, I'm going to run. I'm going to run hard, or I'm going to run long. And when I come back to this driveway at the end of my run, I'm going to make a decision about that issue. I couldn't make a decision before I went for the run because things were cloudy, things were confusing. I just, couldn't sort through all the peripherals, all the residual issues. And when I finished the run, the answer is clear as day.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's a soothing, it's a meditation for me. It's just really beneficial.
It's interesting you say that, because I think about, I used to say I don't have time. Like, I'd get busy with work and then I would say I don't have time to go for a run. I find it maybe in similar, stages as you, which would be when I'm feeling really stressed about work or it's starting to mount up.
Yeah.
30, 45-minute run, I can come back with a clear head and kind of attack it again. Do you find that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's been days when, as a consultant, I work with some great people. And then as a consultant, I work with some very challenging people. And there have been some days when I just come home and I'm just exhausted.
Yeah.
And when I least want to run, that's when I have the best runs. Whether it's run or bike or swim, that's when I have my best exercise sessions, because I guess you get that much more benefit of the cleansing effect of the exercise from being super stressed out before you do it. So yeah.
So for you though, was training, just running, even triathlons, was that always part of your life?
No, it wasn't. I did some. I probably did 5 or 6 sprint tries when my kids were young. That would be in the late '80s, early '90s. But raising kids, and working, and I was very career conscious, and I probably did 5 or 6 of them. I just didn't have time to train and do that. I stuck with the running, with the road running, the 5Ks and the 10Ks, and I've been doing that for 40 years. But I had to quit the triathlon training. And so, and then when I lost my son in 2010, I went to the finish line of Ironman, Texas. And I watched people coming across the finish line at Ironman, Texas. And it was so emotional. And it was in 2011. And it was very emotional. And Blake had been gone a year, still fresh on my mind. And I don't know, it was just, maybe it was a convergence of where I was emotionally and mentally, just being drained from Blake's death, and then seeing these heroes struggling across the finish line at 14, 15, 16, 17 hours. Yeah. And I was moved. And I remember that night at the finish line, my wife and I were walking back to our car. At about a 20-minute walk to the car, and I was so pumped up. This is so cool. And I said, hey, Marlow, do you think I could do one of those? And it was dead silence. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do one.
Especially since she didn't say yes.
She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. It was silence. And that was earth-shattering to me. That was pretty loud to me.
So you'd say the turning point, so is it fair to say the turning point for you was Blake, or losing Blake, or was it the culmination of things?
There was a couple of other things. I lost Blake in 2010, in January 2010.
Yeah.
We're right here on the 10th anniversary. And I wasn't handling it well. For the first 6 months, I was very depressed. I really struggled. And let me back up. For the first 2 or 3 years, I really struggled. Yeah. To be honest with you, it was hard. You know, Blake was 23. I've always said that when I grow up, I want to be like my son. You know, he played varsity football, and he was in the recon sniper unit in Iraq, and heard incredible stories of some of the things that he did. A lot of this were from some of his battle buddies after he had passed away. I heard some of the things that Blake did and he accomplished, and you know, and his bravery was just, I can never imagine myself being as brave as he was at that age, at 23, because I wasn't anything close to that. So
yeah,
and I'll still say today, when I grow up, I want to be like my son. But I didn't handle it well, and one of the areas, you know, some people drink, some people do drugs. I didn't have that. I ate, and I guess that was my comfort. That was my comfort. I ate. I'm nearly 70 pounds lighter than probably the day I made the choice to start triathlons again.
Wow.
And I had taken a business trip up in Oklahoma, and with a good friend of mine, to see a client. And he said, "Hey, you know, check into the hotel. When you get checked in, call me, and I'll meet you." So, okay. So we met in the hotel bar. This was in Oklahoma City. So we met in the hotel bar, and we had a couple of drinks. And he said, "Hey, how about let's go get some food?" So he took me to this steak place in Oklahoma. These big fat steaks, and of course the sides, the potatoes, and I ate all that, and I was just miserable. And then we ate dessert. I mean, we had this massive dessert. I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I walked into the hotel room that night. I opened up my laptop and I signed up for a triathlon.
That's amazing.
And at the time, my son-in-law, who was doing triathlons, had a coach named Matt. And I sent Matt a text message, and I said, "Matt, I just signed up for a triathlon, sprint triathlon, and it's in 5 weeks. Can you get me ready?" And he said, "Sure. Do you have a bike?" And I said, "No." He said, "Buy a bike." And that was
That's how you started.
Mm-hmm. That's how I started. And that was in 2012.
I want to talk more about your time, you know, healing through everything with Blake and losing your son. I want to talk more about that for sure. But I'm curious because when I started, I was also a lot heavier than what I would race at. Yeah. And I did kind of go extreme, like, let's jump right into Ironman, let's go for it. What was the biggest challenge for you making the changes? Because one, like for me, I think about a couple things, okay? There's the side of you're dealing with the loss of your son.
Yeah.
You are feeling probably frustrated with the way you feel. Mm-hmm. And now you're trying to tackle something again, like something big with these other, especially with the variable of, with Blake, did it feel like that? I don't know, just what were your challenges, I guess, with making the change, with all the different dynamics you had going on in your life? Yeah,
well, one, walking into the hotel room that night, I was 238, 235 pounds. And I felt miserable. And I knew right then, I don't want to go through life feeling this way. It's not healthy, and this is not who I want to be. And it wasn't the outward appearance, I just did not feel good internally. So hiring Matt, I think getting started was tough. I'd always been a runner, but you know, a coach will write your workout, prescribe your workout a week at a time. And he had me working out every day. And I thought, that's not right. I need to work out every other day. I'm old and I'm fat. And I said, "Matt, you know, I'm kind of tired." He goes, "Well, you got to push through it. The first, 3 or 4 months are going to be tough, and you got to push through it." But I got some pretty quick feedback within 2 or 3 weeks that this is paying off. My heart rate went down, my blood pressure goes down. I start feeling better about myself. And you start feeling better about yourself, you carry yourself better. You carry yourself differently. You present yourself differently. You speak differently. And I began to see success and benefits of that in all aspects of my life, personal and business.
Let me ask you this then, and would you say that, do you think it helped you start to face what you were up against with dealing with the loss of your son? Do you think that was a turning point at all for you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've been on runs.
You're fine.
And he shows up.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not physically there. I know that.
I know
he shows up. You know, it's a memory. It's a consciousness, and I just go, wow, he's here. You know, and I remember doing an Ironman Arizona, and water was super cold, 64 degrees, and it was just a big loop. And I remember coming back on the loop. I felt so good, and Blake was there. He was with me every stroke. I heard some stories that Blake had experienced, some of the things that he had experienced in Iraq, and I get courage from that, because I know Blake is watching, and I know that he's he's thinking to himself, "Good job, Pops, good job." Funny story, the very first sprint triathlon that I did in 2012, the one that I signed up 5 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
I was so scared, Justin. It was a 300-yard pool swim. 300-yard pool swim, and I was scared to death. Somebody had given me a $5 bill, I'd have loaded my bike up and I'd have come home. I was so scared. I was so nervous. 300 yards, which is nothing today, right?
After you've done 2.4 mile swims, you know.
Yeah.
And you've trained as much as you have to do those big swims and those big races. Yeah, you're right. At that point, 300 is like, that's not even, it's shorter than the first part of your warm up.
Yeah. And so it was still nearly dark, standing next to the pool, and all these people were there. It was pretty intimidating. And I heard a voice, and it was my son. He said, "Pops, you're just going to swim in a pool. What's the big deal?" He said that. It's no big deal. You're just going to swim you're swimming in a pool. It's clear water. What's the big deal? And my nerves just went to nothing. And to this day, before I get in the water, whether it's a half Ironman, a full Ironman, or a sprint, Blake is there. And I remember those words. You're just going to swim in this lake. You're just going to swim in this ocean. It's no big deal. And you know, he's right. At the end of the day, you hardly remember the swim after the bike and the run. But to me, the most intimidating part of the day is starting the swim. And I always say, if I can just get out of the water, I'll have this day made, which is only an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes of the whole day, the 14-hour day.
Well, longer for guys like me, but you've gotten really fast.
So yeah, knowing what Blake went through and how he suffered from PTS, and from some of the stories that I know he experienced from some of his battle buddies, it gives me a lot of strength.
Had you experienced, you know, there's nothing, I can't even imagine losing my son as a dad. I can't imagine this. It's hard to fathom. I've been told early on that our son might not make it to be 2 years old. I have been in those situations, but to actually lose my son, I don't know even how to categorize that, you know. But for me, I guess my question for you would be, had you experienced big trauma like that before, and a big adversity like that you had to overcome years, you know, leading to that?
Yeah, I lost both my parents in '91. I lost my mom I lost my dad in March of '91 from cancer, and I lost my mom in September of that same year from cancer. That was a pretty traumatic year. That, you know, actually the year before that, taking care of them, and then that year, 1991, and but I was raising kids, and I was thick in the middle of my career, so I had some things that would, I guess, help me work through that. You know, occupy my mind and occupy my time. But it was, you know, and it was pretty traumatic. I was 32 at the time, but it was nothing compared to losing my son. I don't wish that on anybody. You know, my son and I were very, very close. And I got a divorce. He lived with me, and we hung out together, and we had our place. And
how many years did you get to have with him, where he was living with you before you were remarried?
Well, I got a divorce when he was 13, and then he graduated in 2005. So he was 18. So 5 years he and I lived together. Marlow and I didn't get married until 2006.
But you had 5 years of that time together.
Yeah,
How
five,
special.
Great, that was awesome. Oh yeah, it was some good times. I hang out with 3 other guys. We've gotten to know each other pretty well. They've also lost their sons. 2 of them were 23 years old when their sons were when they passed away, and 1 was 22. And most recently, one of the sons committed suicide. Similar to Blake. And last night we met, and we were telling stories about our boys. Their 3 boys were rugby players, and my son was a 5A football player, a varsity football player. Those kids can get in trouble real quick. And we look back on some of those experiences, and we laugh now. We weren't laughing in those days, but we laugh now. But yeah, we had some father-son times, some difficult times, but we, the good times far exceeded the tough times, and it just overall it's just a wonderful memory.
This might not be a fair question, so I apologize if it's not, but did you, when you were having that, especially that 5 years together where it was just you and him mainly, did you realize just how special that was in that moment? Do you think?
I don't think I did. I don't think I grasped it. If you'd have asked me then, I would have said, yeah, I know how special this is. Yeah. But in hindsight, knowing what I know now, no, I didn't realize how special that time was, and what I wouldn't give to have it back.
Yeah. Do you find yourself, though, being able to feel any bit of gratitude to recall that time?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The first 3 or 4 years, extremely tough, especially this time of year and the holidays. Blake made a little ornament in '92 when he was 7 years old. Special little ornaments, a little box that's wrapped in paper and has a sweet little poem. Don't open this box because it's full of my love for you. And for the first 2 or 3 years after Blake died, I think 2 weeks before Marlow would pull the Christmas ornaments down, I'd start pressuring up because I knew that ornament was going to be there. That and other ornaments, other things too. And it was just really stressful. It was just, my anxieties, I could feel them go up. And I could feel the depression coming on. And that was the first 2 or 3 years. And finally she'd pull it out and she'd always put it on that table right over there. Because that's, I sit in that chair and I read, and that's the table, and then I'd see it. And the first couple of years I had trouble looking at it. I really did. What I have found now is I embrace those moments and just go, you know what, I was able to have a relationship with a young man for 23 years that's super special, and I'm going to embrace those memories that used to be filled with anxieties, and I'm going to lean into them, I'm going to walk into them, and I'm going to hold them. I may cry, but I'm going to love them. I'm just going to hold them in my hands, and I'm just going to love those memories. And I think that's some advice I've given to these other 3 fathers is don't shy away from those memories that are going to make you emotional. Don't shy away from those. It's part of the healing process. You take those ornaments, you take those pictures, you take those whatever it is, and you embrace them, and you call them yours. And that will help you get through some of the toughest of times. Doesn't mean you're not going to cry. But, I'm 10 years past this. Those guys are only about 2 years, 3 years past their situation. And so, and they may not be ready to embrace it yet, but hopefully someday they will.
Let me ask you this, though. And, you're 10 years past it, but it doesn't mean you're 10 years over it.
No.
And it sounds like, there's Blake right behind us, right behind you. I can see him right there. have made a deliberate choice, it sounds like, to face the pain that comes with remembering someone you love so much.
Yeah. I like that word deliberate. You know, it was a deliberate choice. The word that I used with the guys last night was intentional. You know,
I like that.
don't let it happen to you. You intentionally create that experience, that embrace. So be intentional. It's hard to do. There's a couple of things that I haven't faced yet. I can't drive down the street that Blake lived in when he took his own life. I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Won't do it.
How do you feel about that? I mean, everybody needs to have their own pace on how they heal, and I fully believe that. But for you, how do you navigate that? Do you put that in the category of someday I will, or I'm not going to put pressure on me to? How do you navigate that?
That's exactly right. I'm not going to say never, because I do things today that I 8 years ago said I would never do. That I wouldn't do. I'll never say never, but I'm not going to pressure myself. If I don't have to do it, I won't do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a protection. I don't know if it's still part of the denial process, the denial phase of grief. I'm not sure. I'm not going to worry about it. If I get too pressured up, I'll just go for a 10-mile run and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that explains it to you or not.
Yeah. What would you say has been the hardest thing to face? You talk about that ornament moment.
Yeah.
Right. There's multiple moments that we are choosing to face the pain. What's been, if you're open to sharing that, what's been
I tell you
the hardest?
One of the hardest things for me is, Blake had some great buddies, some great, high school buddies, and some great Army buddies. I'm Facebook friends with all of them. And I think one of the toughest things that I experienced today, Justin, is to see Blake's high school buddies raising a family. Mm. And I see them raising that family on Facebook. Blake would have been 32. And these young men, beautiful wives and beautiful kids. And I just think, Blake, where would he be?
Yeah.
I know he was married, but fortunately, he didn't leave any kids fatherless. But I know he had a beautiful wife, and I know he would have had beautiful kids, and he'd have been a great father. I think that's really tough. I go through that all the time. I see Graham, his kids. I see Blake's good buddies with experiencing the joy of childbirth and raising kids, and some of them are going to first grade, and I see that, and that's really, really tough.
What do you do to, I guess, fight through those moments that you're maybe reliving that or thinking that? Like, how do you find yourself keeping yourself sane through the pain sometimes?
There's a lot of hardships that came with Blake's death. A lot. The magnitude is just, and the magnitude of each one is just so tremendous. But I look back at so many of the positive things that have happened as a result. The men's groups that I've been involved with, mm-hmm. that started because these guys supported me through Blake's loss. We've had I've got some men friends that are just awesome. That are just, I can depend on, I can rely on. The little group of men that I'm working with now. I mean, that is. If Blake hadn't passed away, I wouldn't be able to help those guys. It has cleansed my faith. Years.
How has it cleansed your faith? That's a pretty interesting statement.
For years, I asked myself, for years I said, God, why did you do this to my son? And I used to yell and scream right here on the floor and just cry. Why did you do this? God, I tithed, I went to church, I led small groups. So why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to me through my son? And through a couple of other friends and just talking through it, I realized I was asking the wrong question. And I realized the question should be, God, why did you allow this to happen? See, I'm fully of the belief that God doesn't bring pain and suffering in the world. He allows it because he allows us to exhibit free will. He allows us to be free agents. And a culmination of all the free will decisions and choices that people made, not only Blake that night, but the people around him that shaped him, that influenced him, that formed him, myself. All of those things came together at that moment to create that result. God allowed it. He didn't cause it. And now I'm going, okay, well, God, if you allowed it, you had to allow it for a reason. Now, I'll never know what that reason is. And people will come up to me and say, hey, you need to read this book. This will help you understand why Blake did what he did that night. And I'll take that book and throw it in the trash can. Because there's no book, there's no scripture, there's nothing in this world that will say, oh, that's why Blake did what he did that night.
Yeah.
But
because only Blake can answer for that, right?
Only God can answer that.
Well,
and Blake.
Yeah.
Only God can answer that. And you know what, Justin? I want to keep asking that question. God, why did you allow this to happen? Because I think in my seeking the answer to that question draws me closer to God, but it also helps me identify opportunities that I can serve others through this horrific, traumatic experience.
That is beautiful. Yeah, that is beautiful.
So,
that's still not easy though, right?
No, it's not. And if I could snap my finger and take it back to January 20th, 2010, I'd figure out a way to circumvent what God allows, somehow.
I know.
But one of the things that I've gotten involved with is homeless veterans. Blake was never homeless, but I can see how a couple of bumps in the road, these guys lose a job, they lose their housing, and then they lose their car, and they're living under a bridge. And so I've been serving for the last 3.5, 4 years at a homeless veterans organization in downtown Houston. And I walk in and I see Blake. I see Blake, and so I in asking God, why did you allow this? I've been able to discover lots of opportunities to serve God. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that my faith would be as strong today without my Blake experience.
You see people differently, I'm guessing, because of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You can walk into those and look at the face of those veterans and not just say, oh, I'm here to just help. Like you see them differently than just being an aid to them, right?
Yeah.
It's a deep.
Blake had an ability to see past earrings, body art, long hair, poorly dressed. Blake loved everybody. He just he didn't have a biased bone in his body. He loved everybody, and I feel that now. Blake has handed me some of that grace. So yeah, I look at people a lot differently. I can see, a lot of Blake's buddies, his battle buddies, I've connected with, and a couple of them have talked about suicide, and I've been able to connect with those guys and develop a relationship and hopefully speak some hope into those guys' lives as well.
Well, you talking, it feels like it's effortless. I know that it takes an enormous amount of strength to be able to do the things you're doing and to say the things you're saying. I know you're not just saying these things, you live this, which is why I wanted to have this conversation with you. because I know that's a fight, that's a battle,
Yeah.
and you're choosing to do that. So I just admire, I respect it. Another question I would have for you is just thinking about, we talked a little bit before we started even recording here, just how the dynamics of things that we go through, loss of children, how that can impact a marriage.
Yeah.
How did you and your beautiful wife get through this together? And were there times where, like, I'm just curious how you got through it together, because you're still here 10 years, and we're sitting here, it's going to be 10 years to the day on the 21st of January here. We're just 11 days away or so. So you've been able to stay together while you're hurting, while you're going through everything you're going through. And I'm just curious how you guys got through it together.
Yeah. I was telling you before we began shooting that I read that 86% of marriages who suffer the loss of a child. Now, Marlow wasn't my son's natural mom, but still, 86% end up in divorce. That's a pretty high statistic.
And I want to say, whether it's she gave birth to him or not, I think it's irrelevant to some degree. Like,
it really is. She was very, very close to Blake, and Blake was very close to her.
Right. But
I'm telling you, the first 3 or 4 years, I was tough to live with. Moody. Wasn't the most loving guy in the world. It was very, very tough. And and God graced me with a wife that's so forgiving and loved me through the most difficult chapter that I hope I ever experience. And without her faithfulness, without her commitment, I don't know where I'd be today. She's an integral part. She was a very critical variable in my recovery.
She just knew how to give you space that you needed and give you the time, I guess, or what?
Yeah. She's a very empathetic, very caring, very giving person, almost to a fault. I mean, she really is. And that's not just to me, but it's just to everybody. And one day, I don't remember if it was a week after, or I was sitting there in the chair and I was just crying. And she sat on the ottoman and she takes my face in her hands and she gets real close to me. She goes, "What do you need from me?" And I said, "I need you to get out of my face." So that's how I responded to the most loving angel that God could put on this planet for me. Not very gracious, but that is kind of a model. That was kind of a representation of our relationship for 3 or 4 years. I was, being supposed to be a tough guy and hold it all in and not emote these emotions, not show these emotions. And here she was wanting to be there for me, and I wasn't letting her in. And over time, that facade broke, and I was able to let her in and help with the healing process.
Why did you say that? Here you are, supposed to be a tough guy, hold it all in. Why did you say that?
I think that's kind of what society expects of men. I was literally told, "Hey, my friend lost their son and she recovered in 2 or 3 years. You need to get over it." And those are some pretty tough words, and which are completely
It's BS.
It's BS. It's completely inappropriate. Completely
it is irreverent,
inappropriate.
And inappropriate. You're right.
And so, I just think there were a couple of guys, Charlie and David. I don't know if you want their last names, Charlie and David. I could be real around those guys, and. Charlie and David, we used to, before Blake died, we met up at Black Walnut for breakfast every Saturday morning. And after Blake died, they made me continue to meet up at Black Walnut every Saturday morning, even though I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to shut out the world. I just wanted to lay on the couch in the fetal position and just hope the world would go away. But Charlie would open up the discussion this way. He'd say, "How are you doing?" And that's really, when Charlie would say that, I knew he genuinely cared. And David genuinely cared when I asked that question. And that gave me permission to just lay it out there. And most of it was pretty ugly, most of it was pretty emotional, and they just sat and listened. They didn't try to fix it. You can't fix it. There's no answer to why your son takes his own life. There's no earthly answer. I'll get the answer to that question someday, not on this earth, but in heaven I'll get the answer to that question. And then I'll see all the good that God used that horrific experience. There's the scripture where sin abounds, grace abounds more. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm extrapolating, so hopefully I won't be stricken with a lightning bolt here. But I think where pain abounds, God's love and His forgiveness and His mercy and His compassion abounds even more. In ways that I can't identify it. Charlie and David are a couple of those ways. And the guys that I met with last night, we've all lost our sons, the U.S. vets, all of these things. And I could go on for chapters and chapters about some really cool stuff that has come from Blake's death, the result of Blake's death. So that's that.
It's hard to go from the pain we feel from loss to any loss, any adversity, to seeing the good that comes from it. Do you feel like that's something that if somebody would have told you there's going to be good that comes from this early, you would have believed them? You just kind of have to feel this and experience it for yourself, right?
Yeah. There's no way I would have accepted something like that. Yeah. I had people say it was God's plan. No, it wasn't God's plan. It's God's will. No, it's not God's will. God is, the adjective used to describe God the most in the New Testament is love. And I guarantee you, God cried just as much as I did that night. And He's cried just as many tears as I've cried over the last 10 years.
What are the words that you would have wanted to hear from people more, or that you would say to someone now in your shoes?
People, this has come up a number of times. People say, I don't know what to say to them. They'll say, I've got a friend who just lost a husband, or they just lost a spouse, or they just lost a son, or they've gone through this tragic situation, and I don't know what to say to them. And I said, that's great. Then keep your mouth shut, but just go and sit with them. Just go and sit with them. Just let them know you're there. Because you can't fix it. You got to let people work through the pain. If you try to fix it, if you try to push people through that grief model, it doesn't go well. I had an executive, Fortune 100 company, who was a client of mine. Blake dies on a Thursday night. And Friday morning at 9 o'clock, he's here. He's on his way to his office, and somehow or another his assistant heard about Blake's death. And she called Brian and said, did you hear about Sam's son? He said, no. She told him, and he turned around on Hardy Toll Road and came straight here. He walked in. And of course I was a basket case. And he asked Marlow, he said, what do you need? And Marlow says, we're getting a house full of people. I know this sounds weird. We got a house full of people, but we're running out of toilet paper. No problem. He gets in his Denali, GMC Denali, and he goes and buys a case of toilet paper and brings it back. And we sat out in the courtyard, and he just sat there. I'll never forget that. He didn't try to offer any fix-it advice. He didn't try to offer any soothing words. He just sat there. And that same morning, a friend said, what do you need from us? There were 3 or 4 of us sitting out there. I said, I don't know. I just want you to sit there. I just wanted to know that those guys were there with me in the foxhole. That's all. So my advice, if you ever are in a relationship and somebody is hurting, somebody has lost something, just be there for them. Don't tell them it's going to get better. That's not what you want to hear. It's not what I wanted to hear. Don't tell them it's in God's plan. Don't tell them God has a reason for everything. You don't want to hear that. You just sit there and say, can I fix you something to drink? Can I go pick up some food for you? You want to go anywhere? Nope. Okay. What do you want to watch on TV? You just be. And that's my advice to people that find themselves in that kind of a situation.
Speaking of saying the right things or wrong things, there's a saying, time heals all wounds or all pain, or however that. How do you feel about that? Here we are. I know it's 10 years now, but what do you feel like time does in the healing process? Is it heals all wounds, or what do you feel like for you time does?
I think I can remember the first day or 2 or 3 after Blake's death. I can remember, Justin, thinking to myself, if I could just snap my fingers and be 6 months into the future, 12 months, I know the pain would be so much less. I mean, it was so excruciating, 24, 48, 72 hours. It was just unbearable. And I thought, if I could just snap my fingers and be 12 months into the future, I know the pain would be less. Yeah, I've thought about that phrase, that cliche, time heals all wounds. I don't think my wound will ever be healed. I don't think it'll ever be healed. I think the pain's less. I guarantee you I could not have sat, a year after Blake's death. I could not have sat here.
We couldn't
like
have done this. No.
But I think love heals. And I have been given the opportunity to see the blessings that came from Blake's death. And I'll tell you, and I've said this to many, many people, I'm the most blessed man on the planet. I really am. I mean, I've got a wife that loves me. I've got a couple of dogs that love me, and I've got a great place here in the Woodlands. I have my health. I love my job in consulting. I love it. I'm the most blessed guy on the planet. And I know all the love that has been demonstrated to me and Marlow, and even my ex-wife and my daughter, and everybody, all of our friends and family close to us, the love that has been shown all of us over the last 10 years is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And time doesn't heal. I know love heals. And I'm the most blessed guy on the planet because I'm surrounded by so much love. And I tell you, it comes, my wife and I hosted a community group here in this house, in this room, on Friday nights. And a small group, we did Bible studies and we did some secular studies, but we were close. I'm telling you. Thursday night, Blake dies. Friday morning, the house was full of 40-something people that were in that community group, surrounded by the love. And the love that came from people of our faith. They just, love heals. Justin, I can't overemphasize that.
That's really beautiful. I've never thought of it like that, because I've wrestled with that statement, thinking about loss and different things as far as time. Some of it, I don't want to lose some of the feeling of pain of, like, I think about my mom.
Yeah.
Like, there's this, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. There's a lot of times when I don't want to lose the pain, because that means I've completely forgotten and let go of Blake, and I don't want to do that. So, and I think I get some of that when I embrace the Christmas ornament, or when I embrace the picture, I feel some of that pain, and it connects me to him. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. It's manageable now. I can say it more easily 10 years later. First 2 or 3 years, I couldn't say it that easily.
Yeah, that takes time for sure. I want to ask you this because I didn't get the chance to know Blake, and the circumstances surrounding the way that he left us here, it can paint the wrong picture sometimes. What do you want me to know about Blake?
About Blake?
Yeah. First of all, you told me he designed pretty much your outdoor grill kitchen area, yeah. So he had some design skills. But what do you want me to know about Blake?
Blake was very idealistic. He was naively idealistic. I remember I was cleaning out the garage. He was a senior in high school. I was cleaning out the garage one day, and he drives up in his truck, and he gets out, and he goes, "Pops, I need to talk to you." And so I pulled up an ice chest and sat down, and he goes, "I want to go to the military." Now this is 2004, 2005, and of course 9/11 just happened a few years earlier, and we were in the thick of things in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he would see that on the news, and he was very loyal to his country, very idealistic. He said, "Dad, I want to go in the military." "No, son, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to go to college, get a degree, and get a job, and that's just the way it's supposed to work." And he said, "No, Dad, I want to serve. I want to go into infantry." He signed a letter of intent to go into special forces. And of course, it didn't sit well with me at all. But he was insistent on doing that, and he said, "Dad, I'll go in for 4 years. For 4 years, I'll come out and go to college. It'll all be paid for, and I'll get on with my life." We prayed about it, and slowly but surely, I found myself supporting him doing that. So he went in the military. He joined the military in September of 2005. He graduated in May. Was in boot camp in August of that year, and he walked into every situation naive, but incredibly brave. Maybe that's born out of ignorance. I don't know, but there was nothing that he thought he couldn't do. Physically, mentally, there was nothing. He was the most confident 18-year-old I think I've ever been around.
You're proud of that, aren't you?
I'm so proud of that. He's an example for me. He's an example for me. Danny Amendola, professional football player, was a year older than Blake at the Woodlands High School. And Blake would say, "None of the guys want to try to cover Danny Amendola." Blake was a DB, defensive back. He said, "But I can cover him. I can cover him." Now, Blake would get burned 3 out of every 4 times that he would try to cover Danny Amendola in practice. But that never stopped him. He kept going back. He goes, "I can cover him. I can cover him." Blake just, he was naively idealistic. And that's what I want you to know about Blake, is that innocence moved mountains. You know, he never met a stranger. Funeral was jam-packed, standing room only, for an 18-year-old kid that had touched so many lives. I still get emails, I still get Facebook messages about lives that he touched that I didn't know. And that's what I want you to know about Blake. He's a good kid, very loyal, very idealistic, very patriotic, very brave, very courageous.
Love that. Last question that I want to ask you would be, what does it mean for you to honor Blake?
This is honoring Blake right here. Just for us to have this conversation. You know, Blake's death left a big hole in my heart. And anytime I find the opportunity to share what I've learned and how I recovered, how I grieved and recovered through Blake, that's how we can honor. So if this video touches anybody, that's honoring Blake. I mean, I think that's the utmost in honor for his death.
Well, when I reached out to you, your willingness to say yes and just do this meant a lot. And then when I got here, you said you can talk about whatever you want to. To me, that's not easy for everybody, but I really appreciate that, because I know for me, when someone asks about someone I've lost or in my life and I can talk about them, it isn't easy. Sometimes there's tears and I can't get through the sentence, but it does feel like I got to honor them by talking about them. Yeah. And so I appreciate you giving me the chance to hopefully honor Blake. And I want to just say, from the outside looking in, it's not fair for any one of us to say and speak for Blake and say that he would be proud of you. That's not for any one of us to say. But I will say, as I watch and observe your life, I want to commend you, because I feel like you are choosing to show up. And I know that any son would be proud of their dad that is choosing to show up, choosing to change their life for the better. Yeah. And you didn't let this take you out. And so I just want you to know that that's what I really admire in you, is the fight that you choose to keep showing up, and you're doing it in just really big ways.
Thanks.
And so I'm gonna be behind you on the finish line this year at Ironman. I don't think I'll be ahead of you.
I doubt that seriously.
But I'll be there hopefully with you. It'll be special to be out there. I know you carry a piece of him every time you're out there. Yeah. And so I see you honoring him in just every way you're living your life.
Justin, I look at it this way. God allows us to go through chapters in our life, experiences in our lives, not to hold them close, not to just lay in a fetal position on the couch in our pity party and mourn for ourselves. He does this so that we can glorify him in ways where we can reach out and help others. We're on this earth to serve him and to serve others. And he allows us to go through these kinds of experiences so that we can glorify him and serve others. So how do we do that? How do we do that? And so I want to glorify God, and I want to serve others by talking about my experiences with Blake.
Well, thank you for doing it with me here today.
You're welcome.